I don't know why I kept paying the bill. 62 years old, retired, living alone in a house with too many rooms, and every month I'd go online and pay $12 to keep a number active that hadn't rung in 17 years. My daughter used to ask me about it. She'd see it on the credit card statement, and she'd look at me with that careful expression she has, the one that means she's worried but doesn't want to say so directly. I'd tell her it was nothing. Just a habit. She'd nod and let it go. That was our way of handling things we couldn't talk about. My son's name was Nathaniel. Nate. He was 23 when he died. That was the spring of 2007. He'd been working as a line cook at a restaurant downtown, saving money to go back to school. He wanted to study environmental science. He used to talk about rivers. I don't know why rivers specifically, but he'd read everything he could find about watersheds and ecosystems and the way water moved through the land. I thought it was a phase. I was wrong about a lot of things when it came to Nate. He drowned. That's the plain fact of it. He'd gone night fishing with a friend out at Sallow Creek, about 40 minutes from our house. Sometime after midnight, the friend fell asleep in the truck. When he woke up at 4 in the morning, Nate was gone. His tackle box was still on the bank. His shoes were there. His phone was there. They found his jacket downstream 2 days later, caught on a fallen branch. They searched that creek for 9 days. They never found his body. No body. That's the part that never closed. The coroner declared him dead after 60 days. I signed the paperwork. I arranged a memorial service. We put a stone in the ground at Mercy Hill Cemetery, with his name and his dates and a line from a poem his mother loved. But there was nothing under that stone. Just earth. And somewhere in that creek, or maybe farther downstream where the water runs into the river, my son was out there. Somewhere. His mother passed 3 years later. Heart failure, the doctor said, but I always believed it was grief. Some people can't carry it. She was one of them. After she went, it was just me and my daughter in this world, and the stone at Mercy Hill with nothing underneath it. I kept the phone number because deleting it felt like agreeing that he was gone. And some part of me, the irrational part, the part that still listened for his truck in the driveway at odd hours, couldn't agree to that. So I paid the $12 every month, and his name stayed in my contacts, and I tried not to think too hard about what that meant. 17 years passed. My daughter got married, had 2 kids, moved 40 minutes away. I retired from the postal service. I learned to cook better than I ever had when I was married. I got a dog. I visited the stone at Mercy Hill every few weeks and talked to my son about nothing in particular, the same way I used to talk to him when he'd call me from the restaurant on his breaks. Ordinary things. Weather. Baseball. The dog's latest stupidity. I kept those conversations going even when they only went one direction. Then on a Wednesday night in October, I was asleep by 9:30, because that's what 62 feels like, and my phone lit up on the nightstand at 12:44 in the morning. The name on the screen was Nate. I didn't move. I lay there and looked at that name, and I thought very clearly, this is a dream. I'm asleep and I'm dreaming because this is what grief does. After long enough, it stops being loud and starts being quiet and specific, and this is just my brain doing what it does. But the phone kept vibrating. The light kept pulsing. I reached out and picked it up, and the screen was cold and solid in my hand, the way real things are, not the way dream things are. The call timer was running. Someone was on the other end. I answered. I said his name. Just that. Nate. The sound that came back made every hair on my arm stand straight. Dad. One word. Quiet. Uncertain. Like he was asking a question and making a statement at the same time. Like he wasn't sure his voice would work. I sat up. The room was dark. The dog raised his head from the foot of the bed and looked at me. That's my son's voice. I know it. The way I know my own face. I heard it every day for 23 years. I heard it in my sleep for 17 years after. There's no version of that voice I would mistake for something else. Nate, I said again, where are you? It didn't come out as a question. It came out flat, stunned. A pause, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then, I don't know, Dad. I don't know where I am. Something is really wrong. I've been trying to understand what happened, but I can't. I can't make sense of anything." His voice cracked on that last word. He sounded frightened in a way that was particular to him, not panic, but a controlled kind of fear. The way he used to sound when something serious happened and he was trying to stay level, that was Nate. He never lost it all the way. He'd hold the edges together even when everything inside was coming apart. I got out of bed. I turned the light on. "Nate," I said, "tell me what you remember." "I remember fishing," he said slowly. "I remember it was late. I was at the creek. I remember the water." He stopped. "I don't remember anything after the water." My legs went weak. I sat down on the edge of the bed. My hands were shaking so hard I had to press the phone against my ear with both of them. "I'm not where I should be," he said. "I'm in some kind of place I don't recognize. I've been here for a while, I think, but I don't know how long. People walk past me like they don't see me, or they see me, but they look away fast. I found a phone. I kept dialing numbers I knew and none of them worked except yours. Dad, what's happening to me?" I tried to answer that and couldn't. "Where are you specifically?" I said. "Can you see anything around you? What does the place look like?" He was quiet for a moment. "Some kind of building," he said. "Old. I think it might be a rooming house or something. There are rooms down the hall. The hallway has numbers on the doors. I'm in a common area. There's a window, it's dark out. I can see a road sign, but I can't read it from here. I can try to find an address." "Yes," I said. "Find an address. I'm coming wherever you are. Right now. Tonight. Find an address and call me back." "Okay," he said. His voice was small. "Okay." The line went silent. I called back immediately. The recording told me the number was not in service. Same recording I'd heard for 17 years whenever I forgot and called just to hear it. I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen until morning with my phone face up on the table and the dog pressed against my leg, and I went over that call second by second, trying to find the explanation that would make sense. A mistake. A crossed line. Someone who sounded like Nate by coincidence. A cruel prank by someone who knew us, knew the number. I considered every rational explanation I could construct, and none of them held. The call had lasted 4 minutes and 11 seconds. I checked my log. It was there. Nate's name, 12:44 a.m. 4 minutes, 11 seconds. A recording doesn't ask questions. A recording doesn't hesitate. Whatever was on the other end of that line was present, was thinking, was afraid. 2 days went by. I barely left the kitchen table. My daughter called and I told her I was fine because I didn't know yet how to tell her anything else. On the third night, the phone rang again at 2008 in the morning. I answered before it finished the first ring. "I found something," he said. His voice was different now. More exhausted. Scraped thin. "I found an address. There's an old letter in a drawer here. The address on it is 414 Glenmore Road, Apt 6, Calverton, Tennessee. I wrote it down 3 times on 3 different pieces of paper. I didn't trust my hands. "Nate," I said, "I'm coming. I'm leaving right now. Can you stay there?" "I'll try," he said. "Dad, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen, because I don't know when the phone will stop working. I think I've been living somewhere. I think I have a life I don't remember having. People here seem to know me. There's a man down the hall who called me by a name that wasn't mine. He called me Corbin. He said, 'Corbin, you're up late again.' I didn't answer him, but he said it like it was familiar, like he'd said it 100 times. My throat closed. 'I'm coming,' I said again. Was the only thing I could give him. Just stay there." He said, "Okay." Then the line died. I drove 7 hours through the dark. Calverton, Tennessee is not a large city. I'd never heard of it before that night. I had the address in my phone and I drove straight through, stopped once for gas and coffee, didn't call my daughter, didn't call anyone. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like madness until I had something to show. The address led me to a neighborhood on the east side of town that had seen better decades. Old houses converted to rooming houses, a laundromat, A check cashing place. 2 churches within a block of each other. 414 Glenmore Road was a 2-story brick building that had once been somebody's home and was now divided into 6 apartments. The mailboxes by the front door had names on them. Box 6 said C. Whaley in block letters, written in blue marker that had faded to almost nothing. I stood on that porch for a long time. C. Whaley. Corbin Whaley. A name my son had never had. I knocked on the main door. It was 6:30 in the morning. An older woman in a housecoat answered and looked at me with the flat suspicion of someone who has answered the door at 6:30 too many times. And it's never good news. I told her I was looking for the tenant in apartment 6. That it was a family matter. She looked me over for a long moment and then pointed upstairs. The door to apartment 6 was at the end of the hall. I stood in front of it for a long time before I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. I heard movement inside. Then the door opened. The man who opened it was not my son. He was close to 40, lean, with dark circles under his eyes and the look of someone who'd been awake a long time. He had a short beard that Nate had never worn. His hair was longer than Nate ever kept it. He was wearing a gray t-shirt and work pants like he'd just gotten in from somewhere. But his eyes were Nate's eyes. The exact shape, the exact color. A particular shade of brown that I used to call river water brown when he was little, and he hated it. The small scar above his right eyebrow from the time he fell off his bike at age 9. I put 4 stitches in that cut myself because we lived 20 miles from the nearest urgent care and the bleeding was slow and I'd watched enough YouTube. I couldn't speak. "Can I help you?" he said. His voice was careful. Not hostile, just guarded. The voice of a person who's used to not knowing who might show up. I finally made words come out. "I'm sorry to bother you this early," I said. "My name is Jerome Aldrin. I'm looking for someone. I think you might know him." That was a lie. I didn't know what else to say. He studied my face. There was something in his expression I couldn't read. Not recognition exactly. More like the way you feel when a song comes on that you can't name, but you know it. "Who are you looking for?" he said. I said, "A young man. He would have been in his 20s the last time I saw him. Disappeared near water 17 years ago. They never found him." The man in the doorway went very still. "Something about you," he said slowly, and then he stopped. He pressed his mouth together like he was deciding something. He started again. "Something about you looks familiar. I don't know you. I've never seen you before in my life. But I feel like I have. My knees were not doing well." "Have you lived here long?" I asked. 3 years, he said. "Before that I was in Nashville. Before that I was in Nashville. Before that I don't remember much." He said it flat, like a fact he'd made peace with. "I was in a hospital for a long time when I was younger. Memory problems. They told me it was from being in the water too long. The world tilted." "What water?" I said. He looked at me with those river water brown eyes. "Sallow Creek," he said. "They found me in the Sallow Creek watershed in 2007, caught on a bridge support downstream. I was alive, but just barely. I'd been in the water for more than 2 days. I had severe hypothermia. When I came out of it, I didn't remember anything. Not my name, not where I'd come from, nothing. I've had 17 years to try to put it back together, and most of it just isn't there." I sat down on the floor of his hallway. I didn't plan to. My legs just stopped working and I sat down with my back against the wall and I put my face in my hands. "Hey," he said. His voice changed. The guard came down. He crouched in front of me. "Hey, are you okay? What's happening?" "My son disappeared from Sallow Creek in 2007, I said. "I never found his body." I said it into my hands. "I never found his body." I said it into my hands. "I never found him." A long silence. Then he said, very quietly, "What was his name?" I looked up at him. "Nathaniel Aldrin," I said. "We called him Nate." He sat down on the floor too, right there in the hallway. He sat down cross-legged in front of me like a kid, and he looked at the floor between us, and I watched something move across his face that I don't have a word for. Not recognition, something older than recognition. Something that had been waiting underground for a long time and was just now breaking the surface. "I've had dreams," he said. His voice was barely there. "For years. I always thought they were my brain making up a history, since it didn't have a real one. There's a house in the dreams, white with green shutters, a creek behind it. A dog, always a different dog, but there's always one. And a man, older. He sits on a porch and drinks coffee and talks. I always wake up before I can hear what he's saying. My house has green shutters. We've had 4 dogs. I drink my coffee on the back porch every morning, and I have been talking to my son out loud since he was gone because I couldn't stop. I reached into my jacket pocket. I'd brought something with me. I didn't know why I'd brought it when I left the house. It just seemed wrong to leave without it. It was a photo. Nate at 20, standing in front of his car the week he got his first real job, laughing at something just off camera. That laugh. Every person who loved him talked about that laugh. I held it out. He took it. He looked at it for a long time. His hand was steady, but I could see the tendons in his jaw working. "That's the man from the dreams," he said. "That's him. The one with the laugh." He touched the photo lightly with one finger. "What is he laughing at?" "I don't know," I said. "I never found out. I've been trying to figure that out for 17 years. He handed the photo back very carefully, like it might break. Then he said, "I think I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me no matter what the answer is." "Anything," I said. "Is there a way to find out for certain?" he said. "A test or something. A way to know for real and not just because we want it to be true." I already had that figured out. On my way to Calverton, I'd called a private medical lab I'd found online. They offered paternity and kinship testing with results in 72 hours. I had a kit in my car. I went and got it. He did the swab right there in the hallway. Didn't hesitate. Handed it back and looked at me with those eyes and said, "Now what?" "Now we wait," I said. He nodded slowly. He looked at the photo one more time, the one still in my hand. Then he looked at me. "I don't know what I'm going to do with the answer," he said. "Either way." I told him neither did I. We sat in that hallway for another hour. He told me about the hospital, the long recovery, the social worker who helped him get identification. The name Corbin Whaley came from nowhere and everywhere. The social worker suggested he might want a real name rather than John Doe on his paperwork, and he picked 2 names off the first signs he'd seen from the hospital window: Corbin Street, Whaley Avenue. He'd been living inside those 2 street signs for 17 years. He told me about the years in Nashville, the jobs, the therapy, the strange, persistent feeling that his life was translated from some other language, that every room he walked into felt like it was almost but not quite the right room. His therapist called it displacement. He called it being permanently lost. I told him about the memorial, the stone with nothing under it, the $12 a month, his mother. His face changed when I told him about his mother. He was very quiet for a long time. Then he said, "In the dreams, there's a woman too. She only shows up sometimes. She's always in the kitchen." "She was always in the kitchen," I said. He put his hands over his face for a moment, just for a moment, then he put them down and looked at the wall. 72 hours is a long time when you're waiting for your life to be confirmed or taken away. I got a motel 6 blocks from Glenmore Road. He had my number. I had his. The actual current working number of the phone he'd found somewhere in that building, and used to call me across 17 years of silence. He called once just to talk. He asked me what Nate had been like. I told him. I told him about the rivers. He was quiet for a long time after that, and then he said, "I've always felt uneasy near water. Even a small creek. I always thought it was because of what happened. But maybe it's something older than that." On the morning of the 3rd day, the lab called me. I was sitting in my motel room with the TV on and the sound off and a cup of cold coffee in my hand, and when my phone rang, I looked at it for a long time before I answered. "Mr. Aldrin," the woman said, "I have your results." I said, "Tell me." The DNA profile from sample A and the DNA profile from sample B indicate a biological parent-child relationship. The probability of paternity is 99.98%. I put the phone down in my lap and looked at the ceiling, and I cried, not quietly. The dog wasn't there to press against my leg. I was alone in a beige motel room in Calverton, Tennessee, and my son had been alive for 17 years, and I hadn't known, and I cried the way I hadn't cried since the day they found his jacket in the water. Then I called him. He answered on the second ring. "It's a match," I said. "You're my son, Nate, you Nathaniel Aldrin." The test says 99.98%. Silence. Long silence. Then I heard him pull in a breath. "I don't feel like him," he finally said. His voice was rough. "I don't remember being him. Everything you've told me about that person, I can feel that it should mean something, and it doesn't yet. I need you to understand that. I'm not saying it to hurt you. I'm saying it because I don't want to lie to you." "I know," I said. "I already knew that. I didn't find you because I wanted my 23-year-old son back. I found you because I never stopped looking." Another silence. "I want to try," he said. "I want to understand what I was before. I want to know about the rivers. I want to see the house with the green shutters. But I need it to be slow. I need you to let me come at this at my own pace, because I'm 40 years old and I've been someone else for 17 years. And that's real too, even if it's wrong. Whatever you need," I said. We met at a diner 2 blocks from the motel that afternoon. He sat across from me and ate a plate of eggs, and I had coffee, and we talked for 3 hours. He asked me questions about his mother and his childhood, and I answered every one. Occasionally his face would do that thing, that almost recognizing thing, where something I said touched something in him that was buried too deep to fully surface. He had no memories. What he had was an accumulating feeling of rightness. Like I was reading him a story he'd heard before in another language and only now was beginning to understand. I showed him photos on my phone. Every one I had. Him at 7, him at 15, him at 23 grinning in front of a river in Montana where we'd gone fishing the summer before he died. He looked at that last one for a long time. "I still feel uneasy near water," he said. "But looking at this I also feel uneasy near water," he said. "But looking at this I also feel something else." He thought about it. Like I went somewhere and didn't come back, and the water's been waiting for me to figure out where I went. I told him about the phone calls. That was the part I hadn't fully explained yet. How the number I'd paid $12 a month to keep alive for 17 years had called me from a phone he'd found in an old building. How the connection had worked twice and then gone silent. He said he didn't entirely understand it either. He'd found the phone 3 weeks before the first call. It was in a common room in a building he'd visited to help a neighbor move. He didn't know whose phone it was. He turned it on out of habit and noticed it still had some charge. He said he'd sat there for an hour with this old dead phone and felt an overwhelming need to call someone, an urgency he couldn't explain, and the number that came to him wasn't any number he'd consciously known. It just surfaced, the way certain things surfaced from the parts of his brain that didn't cooperate with ordinary memory. The phone stopped working after the second call. He'd tried to turn it on again and it was dead. Completely dead, not just out of battery. He'd thrown it away. I didn't ask too many questions about that part. Some things don't have explanations that fit inside normal language. What I knew was that the call came, and I answered, and I drove to Tennessee, and my son was there. After the diner, I drove back to the motel, and he went back to Glenmore Road, and we made a plan. He would apply to have his identity records amended. A lawyer I found could help with that, the process of establishing that Corbin Whaley and Nathaniel Aldrin were the same person. It would take time. The hospital records from 2007 would be part of it. The DNA results. His own testimony. It wasn't simple. Nothing about this was simple, but it was possible. 3 weeks later, he drove up to see my house for the first time. He pulled in the driveway and sat in his car for a long time before he got out. I watched from the kitchen window. The dog went to the door and sat there wagging. He came inside. He stood in the front room and looked around slowly. I let him look. I didn't say anything. The dog sniffed him thoroughly and then leaned against his leg. He walked into the kitchen and stopped. He stood there for a long time looking at the room. Then he said quietly, "The refrigerator used to be on the other side." "I moved it 6 years ago," I said. He had no way to know that. No way at all. He put his hand on the counter. He closed his eyes. I watched him stand there in the kitchen where his mother used to be, in the house he grew up in a life that had been waiting 17 years in the dark. And I didn't say anything because some moments need all the air in the room. Eventually, he opened his eyes. He looked at me across the kitchen. He said, "I want to see the creek." "Not yet," I said. "Maybe not yet." He nodded. He pulled out a chair at the kitchen table and sat down. He said, "Tell me about the rivers. From the beginning." So I did. The calls stopped after the DNA results. His number rang twice and was silent after that. Whatever needed to happen had happened. I don't try to explain the mechanism of it. I'm 62 years old, and my son is alive and sitting in my kitchen asking me about rivers, and I have learned to hold the things I can't explain loosely, the way you hold water, not to keep it, just to feel it while it's there. I still visit the stone at Mercy Hill. I told Nate about it, and he said he didn't know yet how to feel about that, about a monument to his death existing in the world. I told him I would wait until he figured it out before I decided what to do with it. We have time now. That's the thing we didn't have, and now we do. Not the years we lost. Those are gone, and I've grieved them, but the years ahead. He is 40 years old, and I am 62, and we are starting from here. Some nights I sit on the back porch with my coffee, and I talk out loud the way I've always done, out of habit. And now sometimes he calls while I'm sitting there and we talk on the phone instead, and it's the same conversation I've been having alone for 17 years. Ordinary things. Weather, baseball, the dog. Except now there's a voice on the other end. His voice. River Water Brown. Still his. I've thought a lot about what kept me paying that phone bill every month for 17 years, $12. Not a lot of money, but every time the charge showed up on my statement and I thought about canceling it, something in me wouldn't move. People would have called it stubbornness. My daughter called it grief that hadn't finished yet. Maybe both were true. What I know now is that the decision to hold on, to refuse to let that last thin thread go, was the only reason any of what followed was possible. Not magic. Not luck, just a man who couldn't bring himself to close a door all the way. That's the first thing I've learned from all of this. The things we do quietly, the habits that look irrational from the outside, are sometimes the ones carrying the most weight. I kept a number alive. Nate found a dead phone and dialed the only number his buried memory could surface. Those two facts met each other across 17 years and produced something that shouldn't have been possible. You can't engineer that. You can only stay in position long enough for it to happen. The second thing is harder to say. For 17 years, I believed I had failed my son. I was 45 minutes away when he went into that water. I didn't find his body. I couldn't bring him home. I carried that the way you carry something too heavy to put down. You stop feeling the weight after a while because it's always there, but it never stops costing you. What I understand now is that the guilt was real, but the conclusion was wrong. I hadn't failed him. Something had gone wrong in the world, in a hospital intake room in 2007, and neither of us had the information to fix it. Blaming myself for what I didn't know was a tax I paid for, 17 years on a debt I didn't actually owe. Nate said something to me at the diner that I keep coming back to. He said, "I want to understand the life I lost, but I need to come at it at my own pace." That's intelligence. That's someone who's learned through hard years of being nobody and then slowly becoming somebody that forcing understanding doesn't work. You can't rush the process of becoming yourself. He did it once when he was Corbin Whaley with no history and no name. He's doing it again now. That kind of patient, deliberate work of building an identity from whatever materials are available, that takes more courage than most people ever have to find. What I want to say to anyone watching this is not that everything works out. It doesn't always. Bodies are found, and sometimes they aren't. Calls come, and sometimes the line stays silent forever. What worked out in my case was the combination of three things I'd chosen over a long time without knowing I was choosing them. I stayed present. I stayed honest. And I refused, even when it looked foolish, to act as though the question was settled when it wasn't. My son is 40 years old and learning his own name again. I am 62 and learning how to be his father in a language neither of us has spoken before. It's not easy. It's the best thing I have. Some doors look closed. Leave your hand on the handle anyway.